Andy is the co-head chief operating officer at bitFlyer. So bitFlyer is it's a fintech. We hosted at the Loft for almost 1 year. Awesome company, awesome team, and I'm so happy that you are in Bucharest with Rikia. So Andy, you're gonna speak about inhuman economics and why an automated economy is closer than it seems. It seems very complicated. Please, a warm applause for Andy. Andy, please.
Great. Thanks, Alex. Great. Yes, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to speak at this event. It's my first time in Bucharest, my first time in Romania. I'm looking forward to checking out your wonderful city.
We're going to party tonight.
Yes, yes, indeed. So Alex said, I'm going to talk to you about machine economics, my vision of the future, or how blockchain will bring the automated economy. First, just a little bit about me. As Alex said, I'm the co-head of bitFlyer Europe. We're a Japan-based cryptocurrency exchange, and I'm currently heading up the European project based in Luxembourg. I'm also a blockchain, fintech, and futurism commentator, occasionally featured in the media, and also a blogger. And actually, more recently, I've been appointed as a board member for Let's Block, which is the Luxembourgish blockchain association, with the mission. It's an independent organization with the mission of furthering blockchain education and understanding in Europe. Just a bit about bitFlyer. So bitFlyer is a Japanese company with the mission, make the world simpler with blockchain. And to do that, we have several different product lineups. The main way we do this is we have a cryptocurrency exchange, both an institutional exchange for pro traders, and also a more retail kind of consumer-friendly product using an app where you can buy, sell, and spend Bitcoin and other virtual currencies. We also have Miyabi, which is our own proprietary blockchain team and product. We market that as sort of a blockchain as a service for enterprise. And you can see some stats as well on the slide. We have 90% of the market share in Japan, so very much the number one. 2 million verified users, 60 billion in monthly trading volume, and one of the things we're most proud about is we are licensed by financial regulators to operate in all of our regions. In fact, we're the only exchange which is licensed in Japan, the EU, and the US combined. So we're pretty proud of that, especially because we also have a bit license from the New York DFS, and we were the first non-US company to do that. But I'm going to focus on the blockchain side and talk about something a bit more futuristic. This is a tech conference after all. And I'll begin by presenting you with the premise, which is the future economy will be barely recognizable to humans. Investment and economic decision-making, far from being under our control, will be so advanced in sophistication that human minds will be relegated to mere passengers in an explosion of automated financial methods and forces. And beneath all of this will be a network of automations of machine algorithms transacting and traversing across a universe of blockchains. That's a big statement, right? So let me just wind it back a bit and start with some early examples. This is a photo of the Chicago Board of Trade, one of Chicago's two main stock exchanges, taken back in 1999. Back then, almost all stock and contracts trading happened in this way. You had hundreds of people all wearing funny colored jackets, waving their arms and yelling at each other. And this is the main way that stocks and contracts changed hands. Contrast that with today. This is a photo of the Tokyo Stock Exchange. Every day, also processing hundreds of millions of notional dollars of contracts. And it's actually quite difficult looking at this to see a single human in that photo. But if you look near the bottom left, you can see a couple of tops of heads. So very much now an automated affair. Another example, asking for a loan. My colleague said that this looks like The Godfather. This is not The Godfather. This is what bankers looked like 100 years ago. When you went to get a loan, you would go to the bank, you would talk to the bank managers, they'd ask you questions about your idea and your business, and they would make a decision based on whether you were creditworthy or not. This is very much a human affair, based on relationships, whereas today, it's more like this. You go to a bank, they punch in some numbers, and then it spits out an answer, like, yes, you can get a loan, or no, you can't. And often you have no recourse, you have no understanding of why it was a no or why it was a yes. It's all done by an algorithm behind the scenes. One final example, using the internet. The internet used to be such a simple place. It used to just be, log in and chat to another human on the other end of the connection, and maybe browse some sort of hobby websites. Today, different story. In fact, you might be surprised to know that less than half of all internet traffic is done by humans. It's increasingly the playground for bots, both good and bad. By that, I mean the good bots might include Google's crawler that indexes websites, but you also have bad bots, scrapers that illegally extract information to post on other websites, or even DDoS agents and so forth. But yeah, like most browsing on the internet is now done by a machine. So it's clear that machines play an increasing role in our economy. You've got the 3 examples I gave you, algorithmic trading, automatic credit ratings, and bot traffic. But there's so many other examples. I can give you a few more. We have transaction monitoring, where algorithms are watching what you're spending, how you're spending it, and looking for suspicious activity. Or you've got identity verification, where algorithms are looking at scans of your ID and making sure that it matches with your face and that you haven't faked your ID, or it's all done by a machine. Auto ad bidding refers to the idea that there's a marketplace where bots are betting against bots, trying to win real estate for the web pages that you browse. So when you see a display ad, that ad has been bid by various algorithms trying to bid for your attention, for your eyeballs. And then robot manufacturing. This is the one that you hear much more about. So physical robots building physical things in physical factories instead of humans. So machines play an increasing role in our economy, but in my opinion, it's just scratching the surface. If I was to somehow represent the entire economic space in a diagram, I think it looks kind of like this. So humans still mostly under control, with small pockets of machine automation, generally unconnected and siloed. But I'm pretty sure in the future it's going to look more like this. So humans increasingly relegated to small pockets of the economy, while machines take over much more of the space, much more integrated and diverse, and taking on a lot of economic activities. And this transition is already underway. So this is a report by Bain that showed that over the last few decades, human share, well, taking the US as an example, human share of GDP has fallen from 64 to 57%. So that means the share of GDP created by humans is coming down. And on the right, we have a chart showing net productivity in the dark gray line. This is basically wealth creation versus the light gray line, which is how much of this wealth creation is going to real people in a form of wages. So for the first few decades, it rose in tandem, as you'd expect, but then in the mid-70s, it started to diverge. And even though we're creating more wealth, the economy is growing, the amount of that wealth which is actually going to humans is only rising at a much smaller rate. So what's responsible for the difference? Well, it's basically the gap caused by the gap in this output is going to the actual holders of capital, the capital equipment. And I don't just mean industrial robots, I mean all forms of automation investments, whether it's algorithms or other technologies. So the transition to an automated future is underway, but I think it's going to get a lot faster. Now, the thing about humans is we tend to think linearly. We look at the speed of change in the past, and we project it the same into the future. But Bill Gates famously said we tend to overestimate what's going to happen in the next 2 years and vastly underestimate what's going to happen in the next 10. So our minds are just not built to deal with exponential growth, but automation is one of those things which is going to be an exponential curve. Now, I believe that we are at the elbow of the curve, and things are going to really take off soon. In other words, ladies and gentlemen, we ain't seen nothing yet. Now, I've made a load of grandiose statements so far without much backing, so let me actually back it up with a real-world example. According to a report by Cisco, the sum of all the world's data that exists in 2018 was 33 zettabytes. Zettabyte is the same as 1 trillion gigabytes. So 33 trillion gigabytes of data existed in 2018. But they project that just in 7 years' time, it's going to be 175 zettabytes of data. That's more than 5 times as much as today in just 5 years. Now remember that 33 zettabytes includes all time since the beginning of the internet until today. And yet, in just 7 more years, it's going to be 5 times that. So, I mean, that's 175 with 21 zeros. It's a huge, huge number. It's quite difficult, though, to wrap your head around these big numbers. So I like to try and bring them to life with a more sort of real-world example. This is the Niagara Falls. And just to give you a sense of scale, that boat you can see has about 150 people on it. Now, that's a lot of water crashing down, right? In fact, every second, 2,400 cubic meters of water is tumbling down those falls. 2.4 thousand tons a second of water. Just imagine it, so much water crashing down, deafening, roiling, boiling. It's a big, big deal. Very impressive if you're there. Now, if 1 gigabyte of data is about the same as a fully loaded 4-drawer filing cabinet, then the growth in data that I've described is the same as for every espresso cup of water coming down the Niagara Falls, that is a whole filing cabinet of data being created. So just think, all of those filing cabinets, all of those espresso cups, that's how fast data is being created today. And by the way, like only 63% of that is user-generated. The rest of it is structural data or machine data that's sort of APIs talking to each other. So huge, huge amount of data coming into existence. Clearly, it's an information explosion, basically. So what caused the information explosion? Well, I think the short answer is the internet. But what was it about the internet that led to this information explosion? And the short answer is removing barriers. Removing barriers led to an information explosion. It was removing barriers to reach, removing barriers to innovation, and removing barriers to cost. In terms of reach, the internet allowed us to have borders connections. It meant anyone could produce content. It was easy to integrate. In terms of innovation barriers, the internet introduced open, compatible protocols like HTTP, TCP/IP, FTP, and they were standard. And you needed no permission to build things on the internet. Permissionless innovation was key. And then, of course, it removed cost barriers because it cost almost nothing to share data. If you're copying and pasting a photo of your cat, almost zero cost. And these days, access to the high-speed internet is pretty cheap. So removing barriers led to an information explosion and a huge space for automation and machine developments. So why is it in the value economy, and by that I mean economy that is concerned with your money or things of value, things you want to keep scarce, why hasn't this same explosion happened yet? Well, simply it's because in the value economy, these barriers still persist. We have barriers to reach, we have barriers to innovation, we have barriers to cost. So for instance, in terms of reach, like we have national borders because of basically the fiat currency system. We have intermediaries required, banks that we have to trust to make sure that we can't copy and paste our money. And their incentives to integrate with other systems are low. For barriers to innovation, most of the financial system is still built on proprietary technology. Companies still have their own silos within themselves. And then for cost barriers, yes, I mean, most of the financial system is profit-driven. They have extremely high back-office costs to run the financial infrastructure, most of which by now is quite old and quite expensive to maintain. So in the value economy, existing barriers persist. And this is confining machine automation to small pockets. Now, the answer to this, ladies and gentlemen, is blockchain. Now, I'm assuming that because we're at a tech conference and we should be reasonably tech-savvy, that I don't need to go into detail about what blockchain is, otherwise that would take another half an hour to do the right job. But the key point is blockchain has properties which makes it a barrier-removing technology. It removes the reach barriers because it's distributed, which means everyone has a copy and it's easy to share with others. It removes innovation barriers because it's open, permissionless. People can build on top of it without working at a company. And it removes cost barriers because it provides a secure way to maintain these scarce assets without having to rely on legacy infrastructure. So blockchain is a barrier-removing technology, and because it does this, it will facilitate an open machine economy. We're going to go from a human economy with barriers to a machine economy with no barriers. People will be replaced by code, And the velocity of interactions and activity will go from something that's quite restricted to Niagara Falls. So that's a pretty big deal. And in summary, blockchain is the trigger for a machine economy explosion. Now, I've talked a lot about economies, machine economies, so let me take an opportunity to unpack that a little bit and tell you a bit more about what I mean. Like, when we talk about economies, fundamentally, I mean, economies are large, complicated things, but if you really boil it down to first principles, resource allocation comes down to three main questions. If your goal is to accumulate capital, as is the case in capitalist societies, really, if you boil that down to first principles, it simply comes down to what am I buying, who am I buying from, and when, why, how do I buy it? That's it. That's basically the cornerstones of economics. So I've tried to develop this notion of an economic tech stack, which can allow us to start to understand how I see this plugging into automation. So if we start with the goal, accumulate capital, for me there are three main layers. Production layer, i.e. what am I buying? Ownership layer, i.e. who am I buying it from? And the investment layer, when, why, how do I buy it? This is my idea of the economic tech stack. And I can break it down a bit more. In a production layer, we have the economic agent, the thing that's actually generating value. So a company, contractor, project, have what you will. That usually involves some kind of governance to make sure it's being managed correctly. And together, they make up the production layer. Once you have production, now we have the notion of ownership. That's supported by contract law. So lawyers drawing up contracts to make sure that you clearly have a paper claim to this means of production. And of course, contracts are also used to transfer ownership from one entity to another. And then you need a way of measuring who owns what. So you have ledgers, you have the shareholder registers, you have the land registry, all sorts of ledgers being maintained to make sure that we have this sense of ownership. And then we go into the investment layer. At the bottom, we have securitization. Now, it's difficult for me to do a good job of explaining the securitization industry in a short sentence, but basically, securitization is taking something you can own and repackaging it in a way that's compatible and useful to trade and interface with open markets. So securitization takes some owned asset, like income-generating asset, repackages it for wider distribution. Once you have securities, you need somewhere to trade it, to exchange it. So exchanges is the next layer, exchange infrastructure. And once you have infrastructure to exchange securities, now you need to actually place the orders to do so. Like, I want to buy this, I want to sell that. So that's the order layer. And then on top of the order layer, you have strategy. You need to decide, like, when do I buy it? How much do I want to buy? Do I want to buy or do I want to sell? So that's the strategy layer. And the strategy is usually informed by data. So this is it. This is my economic stack. And currently, this is a very human affair. So you've got workers that are actually doing the work, creating value. You've got human directors that are governing, making sure it's run properly. You've got human lawyers drawing up the contracts to note ownership and exchange ownership. You've got registrars maintaining the ledgers. You've got bankers securitizing them ready for trading. You've got brokers that facilitate exchange. You've got traders that give instructions to the brokers. You've got investment advisors who inform traders or fund managers. And then you've got the analysts providing research to the investment advisors. So this is my traditional economy. This is the human economy. Now, at the moment, we are some way towards the transition towards automation. So right now, we have a kind of hybrid situation where, from the top down, these human roles have started to be automated a little bit. So we have quantitative analysts who are basically very smart math whizzes who create sort of very, let's say, very automated trading strategies. Those are built by software engineers who write algorithms to actually place the trades. And the algorithms communicate with exchanges using APIs. So this is our kind of current situation. But that's it. I mean, in terms of economy and machine automation, it's only those first top 4 layers. But then going back to the blockchain, I think it's going to change all of this because it's going to reduce those barriers. blockchain will merge this stack together. It'll take us from a place where we have human barriers, walled gardens, protected business models, to a place where there are no barriers, an open economic space, a playground for advanced autonomous agents. By merging these layers together, we're going to provide access up and down the whole stack. So you can imagine some software, some algorithms which are interfacing with different parts of this stack. Maybe one of them's devising strategy and placing orders, or another one is managing the contract or interfacing with the ledger. Blockchain will be present at every step in the stack, I believe. And it's already happening. If we go back to the tech stack, this is where we're headed. Every single one of those layers is currently being worked on. At the bottom, we have decentralized autonomous organizations, so-called DAOs, which are the blockchain version of an economic agent. We have automated governance happening on-chain. We have smart contracts doing the legal stuff. I mean, we've all heard of Ethereum. That was the first widely known smart contract platform. We have distributed ledgers, which was the first and most famous use case of blockchain, but only the first. I mean, Bitcoin was the main driver for that. Securitization will increasingly be done by security tokenization platforms, again, on-chain, and later on, I believe, mostly automated. They'll be traded on decentralized exchanges by algorithms that use machine learning to build their own strategy and using data from oracles. Oracles is an interesting topic. It's basically, if you need to pull real-world data into a trading strategy, instead of just relying on one source of information, like Bloomberg or some political correspondent, oracles are basically a decentralized network that provides information. They use wisdom of the crowds to provide a source of truth without having to trust any one particular entity. So this is my vision of the future. Blockchain will open up the whole economic stack to machine automation, the whole stack. Of course, it's not going to happen tomorrow. There are challenges to get there. I've been very, very bullish and sort of a lot of hype, but of course there are challenges. The main one will be regulation. We need to make sure that in this highly automated system that we're not facilitating money laundering, and we're not allowing the wrong people, like bad eggs, to interact. We'll need to protect consumers from bad actors and from themselves. So, I mean, regulation will be a key topic going forward. On the technology side, we're still not there yet. I still think it'll be a few more years before all of those things are ready. And yeah, technology is still a challenge to overcome in some cases. Scalability is a hot topic right now in the blockchain space. We need to be able to scale the blockchain so that instead of just handling hundreds or thousands of transactions a second, we can handle hundreds of thousands or millions of transactions a second in order to facilitate this new economy. And let's not forget ethics. If everything I've talked about so far is to do with machine automation, we should probably make sure that at least somewhere in all this, we inject human values. Otherwise, we're looking at a pretty dystopian future. So ethics is a fascinating topic, or machine ethics, I should say. It's a fascinating topic that I advise people to look into. So that's really the end of the presentation, but let me just tell you a story to try and bring it all together. Just imagine this future where the economic stack has been completely automated. Or imagine you're a human, and you have an investment portfolio, and you want to get more from it. You want to make wise investments. Now, instead of picking up the phone and talking to a fund manager, you instead give your instruction to an algorithm, a machine, like let's call it InvestBot. So you say to InvestBot, okay, InvestBot, I want to maximize my returns on my portfolio. So InvestBot goes to work straight away. He goes and he digs and he queries the blockchain and he finds the prices of assets and he looks at performance of certain things and he brings in information from oracles and weighs up all the different risks and comes up with his own strategy and finally decides there is an opportunity to invest in self-driving cars, or at least that would be a good strategy. So then InvestBot goes into the market, tries to find some kind of asset that represents an economic interest in self-driving cars, finds that that opportunity doesn't exist yet. So then InvestBot enrolls the help of BankerBot, another autonomous program living in cyberspace, and says, hey, BankerBot, I'd like to invest in a self-driving car security. Can you make that happen for me? BankerBot says, sure, and goes looking around, finds that there is no token for this yet, And so BankerBot then searches around and finds that there is, in fact, a decentralized sovereign entity, which is a self-driving car, which owns itself, which is paying for electricity with cryptocurrency, and it's taking fees from real humans. And BankerBot says to, let's say CarBot, hey, I'd love to invest in you. Can you make that happen? Now, I'm using English, but remember, this is all happening in code. CarBot says, OK, I'll offer some of my income stream for securitization. And then BankerBot then talks to LawyerBot. LawyerBot creates a smart contract on the blockchain, which puts together all of the different rules of distribution and enforcement, deploys the smart contract to the blockchain. The smart contract then provides an origination back to BankerBot. BankerBot takes that origination, turns it into a security token, puts it on a decentralized exchange, after which InvestBot sees that it's appeared in the market, buys it, and finally adds it to the portfolio. Now, I've just described a pretty futuristic situation, but I think the interesting thing about it is that everything I just said, it contains almost all the pieces of that economic stack: securitization, strategy, law and legal contracts, but there were no humans involved in that entire situation. Now, somebody might say, well, hang on a minute, you need humans to actually build these bots, to actually code them, which is a fair point, but I also think that in the future, software will basically be writing itself. So imagine a world where that entire economic stack is now automated. It's the playground for AI, but it's also developing itself. It's evolving. It's programming itself. It's writing new features. Now, that sounds pretty far-fetched, but it's already happening in AI. Take deep learning. With deep learning, we have a certain amount of inputs go in, and an output comes out. But often we can't even understand why it's given us a certain output for a certain set of inputs. In fact, there's now a movement towards so-called explainable AI, because in some situations we need to know how it made that decision. But my point is that these sorts of machine intelligences are becoming more and more opaque. So if you imagine a world where the stack is automated, software is programming itself, then we can imagine a world which is becoming more and more opaque to humans as it gets more and more sophisticated in terms of economic activity. Which brings me around full circle to the beginning. The future economy will be barely recognizable to humans. Thank you for listening.
Wow, 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 wow. I told you he's one of the brightest minds we have in Europe. Andy, great. Before giving questions from the room, what about us? What about us, humans?
It's a very good question. We need to make sure that we stay at the top of the pile.
What are we going to do? Those robots are going to do everything for us.
It's going to be great. It's going to be interesting.
Yeah? Okay. Questions from the room. By the way, I still have 2 books. One of them we're going to give away. It's Factfulness. The world is a better place than you think. It's perfect. It's going to become even better. Questions from the room? No? Of course. Please.
Hello.
The mic? Go ahead.
Hello. I have
Hi.
2 small kids at home. And in 10, 15 years, they should work in an area. What skills should they have in order to survive on the labor work in 10, 15 years?
Very good question. I also have 2 kids, and I also think about this question a lot. For me, the future-proof skills are not going to be the kind of curriculum that we see today so clearly defined. It'll be the softer things. It'll be ability to communicate well. It'll be ability to think critically, something which I really think we're losing our touch with recently. So critical thinking, communication, ability to combine different systems together in novel ways. These are all the things which are going to be, let's say, automation resistant. So in terms of my kids, I'm going to be trying to nurture those skills as much as possible, because a lot of people say, oh, learn to code, learn to code. I actually think that by the time my youngest boy is 18, learning to code won't be necessary anymore. I mean, maybe system integrators, maybe somebody that understands the big picture, yes. but like hard technical skills that can be easily sort of documented and codified, I think are less safe. Or you could be a judge. I think judges will be like still a human affair for a while longer.
What about lawyers or bankers?
I think if you're a lawyer that relies on looking up case law and it's like a knowledge-based career, no. But if it's prosecution, defense law, then yeah.
But what about the revenue? I mean, we think that if we have to be replaced by those robots, everybody still have to live off something. So our universal revenue is all around it.
It's one option.
It's one option.
This is why
our finance minister Pierre is against that because he says he's going to kill entrepreneurship. People.
It's
so
a very touchy.
We come back to the communist Romania that some people know in the room.
It's a controversial topic, but I think the reason that people like Mark Zuckerberg are really interested in universal basic income is because they also see that the rate at which new jobs are created may not necessarily be the rate at which, or larger than the rate at which other jobs become unnecessary. So there might be a surplus of human capital.
Thank you. Any more questions? When do we have time to for lunch? We have to go to lunch together. I'm going to get smarter just by talking to you. Thank you so much, Andy. A big applause to Andy, please.
Thank you. I noticed that the next session is called Beyond Blockchain Hype, so I'll let the next speaker dismantle everything I've just said.